it is time for ESL Pro League 19, and so the Fantasy League is rolling back around again. It's getting very close at the top. I'll get back into that in a moment. We hit the top 41%. Unfortunately, my faith in Norbert was not rewarded this time. Minus 17 points, and VP had a much worse performance than I was hoping for. That really did drag the team down, even though Mouse went pretty far in the event and ended up going up against FaZe. Ultimately, it wasn't a great day at the office for me personally. Top 41%. It could have been worse. It started really bad because Norbert got me minus 11 or 12 points on the first day. I think at one point I was like top 80%. Yeah, top 81%. So we did kind of claw it back with Mouse going the distance, but unfortunately they couldn't get it done, and Brolan had a really bad game against FaZe as well in the last game. So top 41% it is. So where that puts us is outside the top 5 now. We dropped out the top 5, unfortunately. We're down to 8th. It's very close. We're only 3 points away from Blair in 5th position, but you can see that in terms of the points at the top, I've really fell behind quite a bit, and a lot of people are caught up. There is a 14-point gap between me and 9th position, which is Scrawny and Maniac, who have both really woken up and started to put in some massive performances here and get tons and tons of points. So I am feeling a little bit nervous here, and ESL Pro League 19, as I'm about to show you, is not going to be easy at all because they're doing 2 groups at once, and therefore there's a lot of teams to pick from, and the pricing on some of these players is really, really difficult to pick apart. So we'll go into the opening games, and also we'll talk about the groups. FaZe against Imperial, Astralis Eternal Fire, VP Fnatic, 3D Max and Saw. These are all in the top group. Obviously, you have a low bracket system as well, so teams losing the first game won't be eliminated. They'll get another chance. And these are also best of 3s. That should be highlighted. There's no best of 1s in this. It's all BO3s. So Group A is pretty stacked, and it's pretty stacked across the board. You have one really solid team. I mean, more than one solid team, but at least one solid team in each one of these games. And so neither of the brackets looks weaker than the other to me. They're both pretty close. I will say the top half definitely looks a little bit more powerful though. Imperial did well at the major, obviously got FaZe that have landed. I think every CS2 tournament they've been in, they've reached the finals, so obviously they're the top team for a reason, hot off the back of a win as well in Chengdu. Astralis and Eternal Fire, both very powerful. Eternal Fire having a great major. Astralis under Device's leadership have looked like they've been reborn. Getting through to the semi-finals of Chengdu, very impressive performance from them, so that's a difficult one already. VP and Fnatic, I think VP should win that. Obviously, additionally, Mia getting replaced with Electronic is a huge upgrade as far as I'm concerned on VP, but I think it might be a little bit too soon to really see this full potential because they've literally just announced this change, and Mia was playing a lot of the roles and positions that were a little bit more tentative. I don't see Electronic taking those. I think Norbert may fall into that position himself, and then Electronic gets a bit more freedom, obviously, underneath James' leadership. It's going to be interesting to see how things move into place. Fnatic, though, as a first game, should be fairly straightforward. I think they should still win that, all with those caveats I've just highlighted. But in terms of VP going far, I'm a little bit more skeptical. They could. It could be a honeymoon phase position. It does happen, but I'm not sure they've figured it out just yet. We'll see what happens. And 3D Max and Saw, very strong major performance, of course. Should beat 3D Max on paper. Not sure what the Portuguese boys have been up to, though, since the major, and not sure if there's maybe a bit of burnout. These kinds of things come into play. They have had a longer break, though, than a lot of the teams that made it to the playoffs, obviously, as they didn't make it that far. They were so close and yet so far. I would hope that they've been really working hard, because I think Saw is a very interesting team, and their best of 3 performances and record going into the major was stellar. It was phenomenal. They'd won something like 8 or 9 games in a row on the lead up to the major. So maybe they'll keep that going forward. I think 3D Max is a very winnable game for them, and then maybe VP in that semi-finals. Maybe Saw can get the W there as well. Into Group B. And as I said before, Groups A and B are put together in this fantasy, so we're going to be talking about both of these groups. Vitality take on Sharks, M80 up against Bet Boom, Falcons the Mongols, and Tyloo face off against Tyloo. Tyloo face off against Tyloo. Tyloo face off against G2, I should say, in that last quarterfinals of Group B. I think this is a little less stacked than Group A, to be fair. There's definitely some very heavy hitters, But whereas you look at the top half of the Group A and it was stacked with 4 very good teams, Imperial maybe being the weakest on paper. You could even argue that one, honestly. They did well in the major. Astralis weren't there. But Sharks should be pretty easy pickings for Vitality, I'd have to feel. Zaiwu obviously being sick at the major, this is one of the things that people were discussing. Is it an excuse? Maybe, only he really knows. But he didn't have a great playoff performance again at another major. But you're going against Sharks, and this should be his bread and butter. This should be where Zaiwu really does shine, and the rest of the squad, obviously, having a pretty straightforward run of it. I'd expect Vitality to win that game. M80 and Bet Boom is maybe a little bit closer. I think Bet Boom probably should win it, though. Nafani's team, of course. I'd expect them to get the W, but it's going to be closer than, I think, Vitality and Sharks. But I think Vitality beat either of those teams anyway. I think Vitality has a pretty straightforward run to the upper finals unless something goes horribly wrong. And then in the bottom phase of this, it is a little bit more stacked. You got Falcons and the Mongols. Obviously, Falcons deciding not to extend, or I'm not sure which way it worked, if Simple said no or the Falcons. Doesn't really matter whichever way you spin it. Dupree's came in. Obviously, a lot of experience and a lot of previous tournaments and successes with the likes of Magisk, and obviously you got Zonic there as well, behind the scenes. Very interesting pickup. I think a lot of people were surprised to see him getting picked up, but it could add that stability that Falcons really needs. In terms of firepower, I'm not sure they necessarily have it, though. That is a bit of a concern for me personally. It does look a little bit lacking if Sun Pius in particular isn't popping off and Magisk isn't having huge performances. You're dipping down, you're thinking, is there an X factor there? We'll have to wait and find out. The Mongols will not be an easy game first off, though. They did very well at the major, looking pretty sharp, looking pretty scary. I think that's going to be a difficult first best of 3 for the Falcons. And then Tyloo and G2. G2 have been so inconsistent, but I think they're starting to get more strikes than necessarily missing out. I think we're starting to see them actually get a bit more success. Monesi's continuing to shine. Nico's starting to have some better performances. You've even seen Hooksy come out as well. And they've been very public. Like, they're not making changes. They're sticking with this roster. They have full faith and full belief. They're going to keep this roster going forward. I think Tyloo, very winnable game for G2 to kick things off. I think it'll be a good confidence booster. A chance for Nico. And, you know, I want to see more from Hunter and Nexter in particular, to be fair. Monesi, he's just insane. Like, he's always really good. Hooksy has been actually fragging pretty hard sometimes when he's been required, but he's not the guy you're looking to put in big performances. And you see Nexter and Hunt, they're like the spine of the team for me. If them two are starting to hit, you know, fire on all cylinders, then this G2 team is going to be a very interesting one. And I think, honestly, I'd expect them to make it through to the upper finals as well. I think if I was making predictions, I'm going Vitality G2 for the upper finals here. And on this one, on the bottom side, I'd probably say SAW actually over VP, even though VP have Electronic and on paper it's a much stronger team. I think it might be a little bit too soon to get all of those pieces in place. But then again, SAW's a bit more of an unknown quantity. Have they been able to bounce off the major? Have they got really down on themselves? I hope they've held their heads high, because what they achieved at the major was incredible. And this is a good chance for them to kind of like hit the ground running and really kick CS2 off with the best possible way. And I guess I would have to go with FaZe, but something's telling me that this tournament may not be the one for FaZe, and I'll discuss that now when I go through my picks, as I have decided to go for. I haven't locked it in just yet. I was back and forth for a good 30-40 minutes here, guys. This was a tough one. The pricing on a lot of players was extremely strange, and so I've decided to double stack on Vitality, because I think Vitality are going to be really impressive in this tournament. I think they've got a chance now to, you know, now that everyone is hopefully fit and healthy and good to go, and a bit of extra time to look into things, I'm expecting to see Vitality do big things. Spinks and Apex from Vitality. I'm going to go for Hooksy for G2, because I think even if G2 are favourites to make the upper finals, they'll be facing off against Vitality. So I didn't want to stack all 4 players like 2 and 2, thinking they may very well face off against each other. Then I could get minus points from that one. I fancied a bit of FaZe as well in terms of Rain, but I'm not stacking FaZe this time. Not just because of the bracket being a little bit more rough for them, starting off against Imperials, not an easy game by any stretch, and then you have Astralis and Returnal Fire, who have both been in good form as of late. But I also think, you know, these comments that we've seen from Carrigan saying he's never been this burnt out before on CS, and Frozen coming out and saying they're really trying to battle their way through this kind of post-major blues. I feel like eventually something's going to have to give, and something's just telling me it's going to be this tournament. I just feel like, you know, they're off the back of a really important win on Chengdu. They immediately come back to Europe. Something's just telling me not to fully bank off FaZe here, and I could end up eating my words. This could be a tournament where they completely run rampant, they just destroy everybody. But I've dipped my toe in the pool for FaZe, but I've not fully committed with them with a double stack. Also because their players across the board are pretty expensive. Like, Carrigan shot up to 185. He's been around there for a while, but I remember when he was in the 170s. Frozen's 222. Rops is 214, but I haven't been that impressed with Rops as of late. I don't think he justifies that kind of price. And Brokey also got a bit of a price hike. Understandably, he's been very good, but he didn't fit with going for double vitality. At one point, I was thinking of going for Zywoo, and I decided against it because I'd had to drop down into multiple like lesser tier players. And then I finished it off with Story from Saw, because I think Saw will do pretty well, and Story at 196. Yes, he's an AWPer that doesn't necessarily set the world on fire, but I'm not going to be putting the AWP roll on him. I'll be putting something else on him instead. And 196k for a player from a team that did pretty well at the major, has a good record at best of threes, and also has a run of games that I don't think are that outrageous, like 3D Max to kick things off. I thought that was good value for money, so I've gone for Story as my last, but I'm mainly banking off Vitality here to course through pretty convincingly into the upper finals and basically get the W's there, and then hopefully, you know, G2 and FaZe do really well, as do Saw, and they just bag me some points here and there. But this is a tough one, man, because you've got a lot of very expensive players, like m0NESY 239, understandably probably the best player in CS2 right now consistently, especially as you don't have, you know, Spirit at this tournament. They decided to drop out. Zywoo's 236, so he's extremely expensive. Eternal Fire players, I wanted to take a bit of a punt on them, but then again, as I mentioned before, their side of the bracket is a bit rough, and the prices of some of these players are very high. 221 for Xantares, 212 for Voxic. Like, these are pretty rough ones. And then with VP, I did want to back VP, but I think it might be just a bit too soon for Electronic to fit into this team. And if I'm wrong, VP could absolutely smash this and get tons of points. And they're a little bit more affordable as well, like 211, 222, 212, 207 on Fame is very good value for money. Norbert, I'm a bit skeptical on now because he burnt me in the last one. But these are my picks, guys. I'm going to buy this team. Do you agree or disagree? Comment in the section below. Let me know. And how are you doing this season as well in the Fantasy League? I'll see you in the next video. I hope I do better than last time.